Good morning. Good morning. January the 6th, 2023. A year of grace. Hi, Debbie. Good morning. This fabulous Friday. First fabulous Friday, 2023. Hi, Debbie Nolan. Love our Debbies. Love our Nancys and our Lyns and our Sarahs and Cassies. These love all of y'all. I'm so excited about today's Bible reading. So excited about today's Bible reading. I'm Elizabeth Inman. This is our Dream Big Today 1-year Bible study. We're here to encourage you to get a hold of a 1-year Bible. It's by Tyndale. This just happens to be one of the covers that they have. They got many covers. Got large print covers. They've got Bibles that would be more appealing to men with a cover on it than this pink, this bright pink. But it's a 1-year daily reading plan. We read the Old Testament, Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms, and a Proverbs. And when we start January 1 and read all the way through Revelation to December 31st, we've read all the way through the Bible. In fact, we've gone through the Psalms and the Proverbs more than once. And man, when you put it all together, it's so good, so good. So we don't come on here, those of us that are teachers, to read to you. We do know that we have people that may log in at times that don't have access to a Bible, or those that have not yet purchased a Bible. So occasionally we do, but for the most part, this whole Bible study is to encourage you to read for yourself. So we figure that since this is on social media, anybody that's logging in has access to the internet, and whether or not they've purchased a Bible, they have access to the Bible, so they can read for themselves. There's nothing that will replace your own reading of the Bible. Nothing will replace that. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing the word of God. And that is one level. There's a whole nother level to reading the Bible for yourself. And so I can't encourage you enough to read. And then we just come on here to just share our own nuggets, our own insights that we got. Every one of us is going through life. Every one of us is going through something. There's resistance all around us all the time. God didn't even design this life for us to be pain-free, struggle-free. In fact, he tells us that in this life you will have troubles. And it's the reason why we need him. It's the reason why we need our Creator is this life is hard. This life is hard. No matter how good it is, everybody has struggles. And we're reading today in Genesis chapter 13 through chapter 15. And we're still reading about Abram and Sarai. They have not yet, well, in today's reading, I actually think is maybe today's not when he names him Abraham. No, not today. So they haven't even been named Abraham and Sarah yet. It's still Abram and Sarai. And when you stop and think, always when we get ready to start this portion of the reading, I'm excited because this is a famous story. It's a famous story. It's the story of the man who is known through the centuries as the father of our faith, the father of many nations. It's a famous story. If we lined up 100 Bible scholars or just 100 believers side by side and asked them overall to name their top 5 characters in the Bible, historical figures in the Bible, Abraham would be on almost everybody's list, if not everybody's list. How did that happen? Yesterday, I told you that one of the things I got out of that reading is Abram was flawed. Right out of the bat, God tells him to go do something. Take your family, your immediate family, his wife, all of his stuff, and to leave this land, go to a new land. But he said, leave everything, leave your relatives behind. That was in yesterday's reading. And what does Abram do? He takes his brother Lot with him. Nephew, thank you. I knew I wasn't right with brother. He takes his nephew Lot with him. God told him not to take his, he specifically, he wrote it down even. And we're still reading it centuries later. And he disobeyed God. And then he lies about who his wife is, gives her to another man. He's flawed. He's flawed. So this flawed man, how did it end up? How did it end up that centuries later, he's known with the reputation of being God's man, the father of our faith, the one that God chose, the one that God chose for the lineage of his son Jesus, that he chose to be recognized as a father figure on this earth to all of God's people? How is that? How is it that here on January the 6th of 2023, this Genesis reading is so closely tied to the Matthew 5 reading? And even the Psalms and the Proverbs has a link to it. How is that? So I'm going to do my best to share something that will tie this all together, and maybe, okay, let's take the maybe off. That for me was different than I had read at any other time that I've read this. So first of all, it starts right off. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, so this is Genesis chapter 13, verse 5, had also become very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats. Several years ago, what that spoke to me is that others will become rich from our blessings. Isn't that something? To think that my obedience to the Lord would create blessings for somebody else. But that's not where I want to dwell today. So Abram obeys God. There was a little piece in there that he didn't obey because he took a lot with him. And then even though, get this, I mean, we're seeing a glimpse into God's heart that Abram didn't even fully obey God because he took a lot with him, and yet Lot was blessed and made rich because of his association with Abram. Am I the only one that speaks to? So now they're on this journey, right? Let's just take a step back away from the details, because yesterday I talked about what God asked of them was no small thing, besides the fact of leaving all your relatives. We talked about how, what it took to chop the wood just to build a fire to cook the meals to feed them on their journey. There was no running water. They didn't get to stop at the convenience store and go to the bathroom. They didn't get to go through the fast food line to get their meals. I can't even imagine the physical labor that was involved in their journey. And on this journey, they reach this land. They have God's blessing on them. Everything they touch is prospering. Everything they touch is prospering because of Abram's obedience to the Lord. And they reach this land that is so beautiful. Lot looked around at it, and in verse 10, it says, he looked at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zoar. The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. And there's a conflict because they've grown. The blessings have overtaken them to the point that as beautiful and as lush and plush as this land was, it couldn't support all the livestock for both of them. And not a conflict between Lot and Abram arose, but definitely a conflict among the people that was with them by this time. And Abram's faced with a decision. So why am I pointing these out? Because I had wondered why Abram? What did Abram do or not do that here we are centuries later still anticipating reading the story of Abram and Sarai? What made him so different? Why not Abel? Why didn't God pick Abel? I mean, Cain and Abel, why didn't he pick Abel? Abel brought acceptable sacrifices to the Lord. Why not Noah? Now, Noah's a famous person, but at least in my circle, he's not as famous as Abram or Abraham. Why didn't he pick, and I could name, why didn't he pick Abram's father? Why did he pick Abram? And I'm looking for those answers as I read today. So my first clue, as one of my teachers I'm listening to would say these days, my first clue is they reach this place where a decision has to be made. The land can't support both of them. And there's dissension in the crowd, in the group. And so Abram and Lot come together. Abram is the leader. Lot recognizes that. Lot's the nephew. Abram's the uncle. Lot came on the journey with Abram. Leadership is important. Divine alignment is important. And Abram could have decided anything he wanted to decide. It does not say in our text today that God said, Abram, you give Lot this land. That it didn't say that. But you know what Abram did? He gave Lot the best of the best. He gave Lot the best of the best. I mean, how many of us, when we were little kids, would get that special treat, that candy bar, but there's only one and there's two of us. There's two of us siblings, and there's only one candy bar. And so how many of y'all, your parents would say, okay, well, you break it in half. And then when you break it in half, he gets to choose which half he wants. And which one of us would have picked the bigger piece? Which one of us would have picked the bigger piece? That is the choice in front of Abram today. And hands down, without hesitation, he tells Lot he can choose whatever he wants. And what does Lot do? He chooses the bigger piece. He chooses the plush, green, fertile Jordan Valley that by all rights was way more fertile. And then what was the very next thing that happened? After Abram sacrificed the best and gave it to his nephew, look what happened in verse 14. After Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I'm giving you all this land. All this land, as far as you can see, to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that like the dust of the earth, it cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. Abram gave it away to Lot, and God gave not just that part back, but all the land that he could see in every direction. That is the heart of our God. And yet we hesitate to just give him 10% of what's already his to begin with. See, all that land belonged to God. But Abram gave up his right to the Jordan Valley and let Lot take what looked to be the best of the best, not knowing that God would do the next thing he did, not knowing. There was no indication that Abram knew by any stretch what God was going to say to him in verses 14 through 15. Wow. I don't know about you, but I could sit and ponder and let God speak to me and change me from the inside out. There were times when I was a kid that exactly that scenario, Elizabeth, I'm going to let them break it in half and then you pick which half you want. And I took the bigger half. Just being honest. Just being honest. Wonder how many blessings I blocked. I wonder as an adult, when I'm given the decision that I could bless somebody or I could take the blessing. This is going to be tied to the New Testament reading very shortly. So Abram gave, and God poured the blessing on. In fact, he establishes the point in time that Abram will be set apart and held in such high esteem through the end of time. Because I believe that until there is no more, Abraham will always be known as the father of our faith. I believe that that is a truth that is etched in history that will never, ever be erased. He gave away the best. He was willing to sacrifice the best. So after God did that, on this journey that it literally would go so slow, I can't even imagine the patience it took to make this journey. When they had to stop, did they eat 3 meals a day? I highly doubt it. I don't believe they could have stopped to gather the food to eat or kill the animal to eat for the meals 3 times. I don't know. I don't know. But what about personal hygiene? Once again, how did they make a fire did they make a fire to be able to eat their meals? I mean, I packing everything up, they had to have certain tools for their animals. I could go on and on and on. And yet, look at what Abram did in 18, verse 18. So Abram moved his camp to Hebron and settled near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. And there he built another altar to the Lord. See, we're getting glimpses into not just God's heart, we're getting glimpses into Abram's heart. He didn't go and have a party and say, whoo-hoo, I'm rich. All this land belongs to me. Ha, 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 Lot. You thought I gave you. Look at what God gave me. Look at the humbleness in this man. We see that same humbleness in us. Look at the sacrifices he was willing to make, even of his time. We won't even sacrifice our time to go to church for 2 hours during the week, but let alone twice or 3 times if your church holds services 3 times a week. We won't make that sacrifice. Oh no. See, we're too important. My rest is too important. I'm tired. It's the only day I get to sleep in. It's my only day to rest. We won't go to the nursing home and visit those that have no family that comes and sees them. We won't push the neighbor's trash to the curb to help them out or mow their yard when we know that the husband's in the hospital, or offer to bring groceries to a family in need, or the list goes on and on and on. I'm watching Abram because I want to know what set him apart from everybody else up to this point in time in God's heart. I want to know God's heart. What did he see in Abram? And who was Abram in God's eyes? So then what happens? A war breaks out. You know what? If we continue to read with these thoughts in mind, we'll see a pattern. We'll see a pattern. Opportunity for a decision. The decision is made. The blessing comes. And the resistance hits. The war breaks out. And then another decision has come for us to decide. I set before you on this day blessings or curses, life or death. Every day we're faced with decisions. Do I choose blessings or do I choose curses? Do I choose life or do I choose death? Every day we're making those decisions. And Abram was faced with one. Once again, war breaks out. And that lush, plush, green Jordan Valley that looked as though it was the best of the best, that was going to continue to add to Lot's prosperity, ended up being the very location in which he was captured and taken as prisoner. And once again, Abram's faced with a decision. At a time when everything was a struggle, they didn't have an electric stove, a microwave oven, didn't have central heat and air. Everything took energy, everything took effort. And in verse 14, Abram made the decision to stop what he was doing and to go rescue his nephew Lot. And the fact that he had 318 trained men to take with him, to me, is a miracle. He started out Abram and his wife and Lot and his wife. And now he has 318. So verse 17, after Abram returned from his victory, the king went out to meet him and he had a choice. And when he talked with the king, he told him in verse 22, I solemnly swear to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal from what belongs to you. He was faced with another choice. He could have taken the best of that king's ransom. He had defeated him. That's not what he decided. Once again, he trusted God. And I skipped over the part where Melchizedek came as the priest of God Most High, and the very first tithe was given that Abram gave of his hard-earned belongings, a tenth to the priest, and then the blessing that was bestowed on Abram because of it. Wow. Clues all along the way. So much in here, I could take weeks and just study this text to get clues on how to conduct myself, to get clues on where I need to repent and turn from my selfish ways, my prideful ways, my greedy ways. And then it comes to the place. Well, okay, let me back up because I want to continue this in order. So, faced with a decision, he gives Lot the best of the best. He makes the decision. He receives a blessing from God. He makes the decision to do a sacrifice. Faced with a decision, Lot's been captured. He extends his time, energy, resources, saves Lot, receives a blessing, makes another decision not to take from the king, and then God gives him another blessing. And this is in chapter 15, verse 1. So sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you and your reward will be great. That blessing is by far, I mean, oh my goodness, what a blessing that is. And I want you to see the pattern that's here. That's what I'm wanting you to see is the pattern. But then that leads us to my nugget for all of the reading today. I'll start in verse 4, chapter 15, verse 4. Then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir. So what happens in chapter 15 is, see, Abram didn't care about the land. Lot, if you want the best, take it. See, Abram didn't care about the possessions. No, king of Sodom, I'm not taking your stuff. Abram did care about and wanted desperately a son, because we talked yesterday that a man without a son was counted as worthless. A woman who couldn't give her husband a son back in these days wasn't even counted as worthy to be a wife. Their whole value in life was based on their ability to produce other man-childs, to go forth and be fruitful and multiply the earth, fill the earth. Mandate from God. And Abram and Sarai had not been able to have a child. And so for the first time we see in this story that Abram pauses and asks God for a son. And then comes up with an alternate plan. But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. So you've given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants is going to be my heir." And God said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir." And then pay attention, verse 5. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, now, in this moment, Sarai's not pregnant. In this moment, this man who all he wants is a son has no evidence that that's ever going to happen. Healing hasn't taken place physically. There's no physical evidence that I'm healed. There's no physical evidence that I'm going to be blessed. My bank account is still in the negative. There's no evidence that I'm going to be able to pay my bills. There's no evidence physically. There's no evidence of this blessing that God's spoken to Abram. There's no physical evidence. Verse 5, then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. But there was no physical evidence that would ever happen. In verse 6, here's the nugget. And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. He believed. It wasn't because he gave Lot the best of the best. It wasn't because he wasn't selfish with the king of Sodom. It wasn't because. There was one reason, and one reason only, that here we are on January the 6th of 2023, and we see Abraham, as one of the greatest heroes to ever walk the face of the earth, the father of our faith. See, he was the father of our faith because of his faith, because he believed God. See, I keep looking for a magic formula. I keep thinking, well, if I read enough, I mean, I'm on my 20th year, Lord, reading this word. If I say the right prayer, if I just learn how to pray better prayers, maybe if it's the way I lay hands on somebody, they might be healed. As God searched all the earth, I don't even know what the population was at this point in time, but Abram himself had 318 men that he mobilized, and he'd left all his family. There was a lot of people on the earth by this time, is my point. He could have picked any of them. What was the criteria he used to pick Abram? Because Abram believed God. Wow. Wow. Wasn't because he was the best cattleman, best shepherd. It wasn't because he was the best blacksmith. It wasn't because he was the best preacher. It wasn't because he was the best father. It wasn't because he wasn't even a father. It wasn't because he was the best brother or uncle or husband. He believed God. What is it in your life right now today that you're having a hard time believing God? What has God spoken to you? See, God spoke to Abram and he believed. And then we get the very first covenant that's made, an amazing thing that happened. God tells him things in advance. See, he told him things in advance, clear back. The first chapter, 13, verse 14, when he said, look up as far as you can see in every direction, this land is yours. He told him things in advance when he said, look up and count the stars. That's how many descendants you'll have. And then he tells him again things in advance that in 400 years, there's going to be, your people will be slaves for 400 years, not in 400 years, but your people, your descendants, my people will be oppressed and in slavery for 400 years. He tells Abram things in advance. God's telling us things in advance. Are we listening? See, God told Abram things in advance and he believed him. He believed him. And then we're in Matthew. I could spend just as much time. I've already used up all my time this morning in the Old Testament, and I could use all that amount of time and more in everything that's in Matthew, but I want to tie it together. Abram was faced with a choice. The land can't contain both Lot's family and his possessions and mine. So he let Lot have best of the best. He was faced with a choice. He's defeated and brought Lot out of captivity. And he's talking to the king who had done that. And he promised him, I'm not going to plunder all your stuff. I'm not taking one thing from you. I got what I wanted. I just wanted Lot free. I'm not about material possessions. I'm not about destroying you. I got what I wanted. And then we're going to start in Matthew 5:38 to tie this together. You've heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek. Our pastor on Sunday did an outstanding job of bringing up that it wasn't just turn the other cheek, it's offer the other cheek. See, that's what Abram did with Lot when Lot chose the best valley. That's the same symbolism as he just offered him the other cheek. Same thing he did with the king. I can wipe you out. I can take everything I can kill you. And he turned the other cheek. When they spit on you, what do? When they call you a liar, what do? When they betray you and they cheat on you, what do? Verse 10, if you're sued in court, what do you do? They take you to court. You get served papers. What do? You get the notice from the IRS, you're getting audited. What do? I can remember how I felt the second year into this brand new business that God created for me, and I got notice that I was being audited by the IRS. I know what that stink bug felt like out here flying around trying to land on my shoulder with great big letters across his forehead, FEAR. Oh my gosh, have you heard what the IRS does when they audit you? Oh my word. And I kept batting that stink bug away. No, no, no. And then I prayed and I sought God, and God spoke, and he gave me a word, and he gave me a scripture, and I believed God. I give you dozens of times when I didn't believe God. But I believed God. And we came out of that IRS audit smelling like a rose. And it became the basis for the next 10 years of my business and the way I do my books. I learned a lot. If you're sued in court, what do you do? It is written, God says, if you're sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. Wow. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Do you see that that's what Abram did in our reading today? Can you see the correlation in these two things? Do you hear what God's speaking to you today? Your husband keeps making mistakes. Your husband keeps messing up. He keeps making the same mistakes over and over again. You offer the other cheek too? Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You've heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say, love your enemies. You think in that moment when Abram, with a pure heart, says, Lot, pick whatever you want. You think that there's those of us that when he picked the luscious valley would have seen Lot as an enemy at that point? We would have resented the fact that he took the best from us. But I say, love your enemies. Your ex-wife, your wife's ex-husband, the step-parent to your children, your daughter-in-law, your son-in-law. Why is it that in-laws has a negative connotation in our world? Why is that? Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you'll be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there in that? Abram had no reason whatsoever not to take out that king that had just kidnapped and taken captive his nephew. How would have I responded in that situation? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? We go around saying, I got a right to be angry at that person. I've got a right to hate that person. Well, nobody in their right mind would love that person. What do you mean, serve that person? What do you mean I have to be nice to that person that just got through telling me that that's their seat in church? How dare they come up and tell me that I took their parking spot? Wow. Wow. You're kind only to your friends. How are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I would put before you today, at least in my own life, the reason I would display behaviors like I've described today, that I could give you stories about the times I was selfish. I could give you stories about the times I was prideful. That I could tell you stories about myself personally, that I wasn't generous, that I had people steal from me and I wanted to kill them instead of giving them my coat too. Because I didn't believe God. See, he wrote it down for us. It's in today's reading, how we respond, how we, as children of his, are to respond. But we have to believe him first. We have to believe him, for he's given us the faith to believe. Gives us the choice to exercise the faith, which is a free gift from him, or to entertain unbelief and doubt. We have that choice. Abram was given that choice over and over and over again. And we see the times when he chose unbelief and he gave away his wife. And we see the times he believed God. The father of our faith. You guys have a fabulous Friday.